Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 111. I'm so excited because Chris McDonald is someone who is part of the PsychCraft Network. I had no clue about her podcast. And then I jumped on her podcast, and now she has at least one more subscriber, thanks to me. And the PsychCraft Network, free plug here, and nothing being told to do. But really, there's a lot of great therapists. But easily one of my favorites that I had not discovered until I got on there was Chris's podcast. And so happy that she also voluntarily said that she's going to come on to this podcast, which is really weird to me. But Chris, welcome to Finding Your Way Through Therapy.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
Well, you're lucky you get to see the first setup of this, my office/podcast studio. Hopefully everyone hears me really well. Sure, my editor is going to tell me crap, but usually we start off with a few basic questions. The first basic question is, tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I own a holistic virtual practice, which is online, and we work a lot with young adults with anxiety, depression, trauma. That's usually the age group that I work with the most with. I have one other clinician that works under me, but she's willing to work with some of the older people. So we kind of spread that out a little bit. And I also have a podcast called the Holistic Counseling Podcast. And that's geared towards mental health therapists who want to deepen their knowledge of holistic modalities and build their practice with confidence. And I actually surprisingly do have a lot of other kinds of listeners I'm learning too. Some people that are just curious about, I call it holistic curious about holistic modalities in general. I also have heard some other people like massage therapists listening, some other doctors. So yeah, there's a wide range I think there too. But yeah, I love everything holistic is one thing that I'm super passionate about, and that's what kind of brought me to this podcast and allowing people to know that these are okay modalities to learn about and integrate into therapy. So it's a little bit different than traditional therapy. So that's one thing I talk about too is the differences and how that can be integrated into sessions. So I do help therapists a lot. I offer therapy for therapists, and I also teach therapists. So I offer courses for therapists to teach them how to do this, how to use some of these modalities like yoga, breath work, meditation, mindfulness, those kind of things.
And I certainly enjoy the holistic process of your podcast. I listen to it. I practice Reiki myself.
Oh,
I,
nice.
I practice Buddhist principles myself. I do breathing, mindfulness,
All that.
meditations. Yes, that's not what people would expect from me. I know that, and that's fine. But I think people know how I don't keep to one subject, but all the time. But I want to hear more.
Yeah.
We don't just
Mhm.
wake up one day and go like, oh, you know what? This private
I'm
practice is
holistic.
holistic. That sounds like a
I
good
woke up.
idea. It's like people who tell me about substance use
Oh,
are
I
like,
know for
someone
sure.
wakes up and go, yeah, I'm going to get addicted to some sort of substance. That's what I'm going to do today. So how do we go from, go from being a therapist to a holistic therapist and
Yeah.
have even a podcast and everything
It
else that goes with
it's
that?
been a journey, Steve. I got to tell you that. It's no, there's no way I thought I'd be where I am right now. There's no way years ago. So when originally started out as a school counselor, so I went into that, and what we do in the school system is provide more brief solutions, which means just, short-term problem solving basically. And we're technically not supposed to provide quote unquote therapy, but really it is because we would have kids that would stop by and we'd see all school year long. So, but I did find my journey started with breath work because I had kids that I'd see regularly and they would just struggle with just the problem solving part. And they're still like, I can't relax. I'm still having difficulty focusing because of the anxiety. So I started using breath work at a teacher retreat I had gone to, and I was like, whoa, this is really cool. So I started to study it on my own. There were no podcasts then. I'm aging myself, but there was a lot less resources out there. There wasn't YouTube. So I had books I had bought that I was learning on my own and practicing. And it was harder to find trainings then. So, but once I started to use this and saw the difference with clients and how they're able to regulate their nervous system more, it was amazing. So really started there and practiced, personally and professionally. And then just kind of shifted to meditation, started to learn about that. So it's been a gradual process for me. I actually joined a Buddhist group, Sangha, we call that, and started to meditate with them weekly. That really helped me to get consistent because I meditate just about every day, do some kind of meditation, and I do yoga most days as well. Usually every day, usually for yoga, but meditation sometimes it's hard to do it all.
Yeah.
But I love all these practices. So that's my goal for retirement to be able to do all these every day, to do more of these holistic practices for sure.
So when you say that you went to the breath and then you got more curious and more curious,
Yes. Yeah.
um, I think that that's one of the things that people think we do, right? Like we're become holistic. So therefore, we meditate while we're driving and we close our eyes and we do deep breathing, bring our heartbeat to two per minute.
Oh,
How do
wow.
we debunk some of these myths that people think that like, because when they hear holistic, I think they
Yes.
expect us that we don't have any emotions, we're always happy, or we're
Or
always,
Zen. Right.
yeah. Now,
Not true.
I'm not, well, I adhere to a lot of these principles. To say that I'm a Zen person probably would be quite a lie because I'm a very passionate person. And I think both can coexist. But how do you explain to people that you don't need to be holistic everywhere in your life?
Oh,
Because
no, not at all.
how do we explain that to people though? Because I think
I
they
say
don't get
that's
it.
like that's a continuum, right?
Right.
So some people, like I said, are holistic curious. Maybe they've heard about some of these practices and they're just kind of investigating. And there's no judgment either. You don't have to be all in like me. It's okay. So maybe you just want to learn about one thing and just get more information listening to this podcast. You're just seeing what's out there. And the same with therapists. If there's any therapists here that are just like, what is this holistic therapist business? And how is this different? Right. And how can this make a difference for people, myself and clients? Because to me, this is, like I said, personal and professional. It's not like, hey, I got therapy sessions today. I want to teach some breath work. No, these are practices I do on my own. I embody these for myself and I believe in them. That's why I'm so passionate about it because it helps me to regulate my anxiety and my issues. No, it's not 100%. Yes, I get anxious. Like this morning, I was very anxious with some things that came up and a little bit overwhelmed, but I did went back to my breathing before this interview and got myself more regulated so I could focus. So it's just having these tools available to you. But just know that, you don't even have to identify yourself as holistic. I did not identify myself that until I'm trying to think if it was right before I started this podcast that I offered these, but I didn't even call myself a holistic therapist. I just started to embrace that. I got my yoga certification and I didn't call myself a yoga teacher until like a year later. So it's kind of stepping into that role and really feeling it mind, body, spirit. For me,
Right.
that was kind of my process.
One thing that I've identified to the mind, body, spirit process for many, many, many years at this point, and I think that that's so important. I
Yes.
don't. I think that for me, you can get the best mental health treatment in the world, get into best physical shape in the world. If your spirit's not right, does it really matter?
Nope. And they're all interconnected.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that people use the word soul or
Yeah.
religion or stuff like that. I like spirit because
Spirituality.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think
No,
it's
I
good
agree.
to balance all that stuff up. But you brought
Oh,
up a
for
question
sure.
about your managing your anxiety and how holistic stuff really
Yes.
helped. Well, I'm going to twist that question a little bit because this is a standard question on finding your way through therapy. Have you
Sure.
ever been in therapy? Because, when you talk about anxiety, I know sometimes we need help to
Yes.
manage that. So tell me more.
Absolutely. I've been in therapy a lot. I actually just took group counseling for myself
Mm.
recently. So that was a unique experience as a therapist. I've never done that before. I was a nervous wreck to start this group. I was like, "Oh my god." And it was virtual. So it's a little bit of an odd experience because you see everybody in the little squares on your screen and, when do we say something? When do I sit back? It was really difficult. It took a while to really feel comfortable, but I appreciated other people. It was all therapists in this group, by the way. And it took a while for everybody else to get comfortable, and once we got rolling, we were all opening up more, and it was nice, though, because everybody was sharing, like, how hard it was, even as a therapist, to open up in group.
Well, I don't think that because
Yeah.
we're therapists, things are easier for us in therapy.
No, not at all. Yeah. It was uncomfortable, because especially because in the beginning, like, there was a lot of the silence. She would ask
Hmm.
her question, and for me, I felt like I had to break the silence. I was like, "Wait, I gotta say something because this is just so uncomfortable." It is. It really is.
But I think it's uncomfortable for silence, but it's also uncomfortable, for me. One of the things that I did not think about
Yeah.
until someone mentioned it to me, they're like, "Oh, so you do treatment with therapists?" I'm like, "Yeah." "Aren't you afraid they're analyzing you too?" And I'm like, "Until this moment, no, never thought about it." But does that also play a factor when you're in a group therapy with a bunch of therapists? You're like, "Am I going to say the right thing?" Does that play a
Yes.
factor?
Yeah, I think initially I think it is kind of finding your way through, like you said, your podcast, finding your way through
Bug.
therapy. Finding your way through group therapy because it's a totally different experience. It's almost like that sensation. Everybody's eyes are on you, right, with the video, and it's just a different feeling than individual, I think. And just being open to listening to other people, and yeah, because it's not all about you in the group.
No, it's not.
And that's it. It's the group process and, how are we supporting each other in the group? And, but I guess the best part for me was the commonalities and just knowing the struggles that everybody else has and are similar to mine. So I'm not alone in this. That universality, I think, was what really helped me. And what's interesting? So I'm 52, and in my life, I had gone to individual therapy, but this brought up some things that I didn't even know affected me
Mhm.
until now. I mean, it took me this long to figure this out. So, guess what? Therapists are still learning about themselves. To me, it's a lifelong process of growth and understanding. And okay, so this is something from my childhood that still impacted me that I didn't realize till now, but that's okay. And this is
Right.
something that I've identified and have awareness so that I can work on this issue. Yeah.
Well, I also think that what most people, I broke that a little barrier a couple of months ago. I had my people like, "Oh, it must be great to be and your therapist must be great to have friendships with you, or be, you're, dating you." And my girlfriend came on to the podcast, and a lot of people are like, "Wow, I didn't think it would be that much of a challenge to date a therapist." And I'm like, "Oh, because I don't have any feelings, because I don't have."
You have it all together, don't you?
Do you?
No.
With all due respect to all my PsychCraft members, I mean, we sit in those meetings and I could clearly tell we don't always all have it together, and that's okay. And that's cool for me anyway. It's all
We are
absolutely cool.
human. Yes. Yeah.
Do you help your clients sometimes to see you as a human? Because for me, one of the
Yes. Mhm.
the first thing I ever was told by my intern supervisor, and I always remember that I did the interview thing. She asked me how I thought I did. So I asked all the questions and all that. She said to me, "Where the hell were you in that room? Because you just asked questions. You were not there." And ever since then, I've
Mm.
always integrated myself. And I think that's important for people to see us as human beings. Does that happen with
Yes.
you?
Absolutely. And I don't as a therapist, I'm not into that model of that we're blank slates, that we don't say anything about ourselves. And for me, I use some self-disclosure just to make me more human. And the clients are always like, it's like a sigh of relief almost when I say something or I curse in session, and they're just like they laugh, and it helps them relax and be more themselves. Cause I feel like sometimes when people start, they're just like afraid to they have to put on this role that they can't relax into it, and they can't curse if they want to curse. And I think the more that I'm genuinely myself, the more they pick up on that. And I think it's okay for therapists to say, you know what, I had a really shitty morning. So I'm going to do my best to be present and a lot of times they offer support and it's not my session, but I just want to let you know that. But it's okay to let them know that we're not gliding by. I'm just yoga and meditation and everything is peachy keen because we
I
have our struggles too.
Well, speak for yourself. I don't. I'm perfect.
I know
But
you.
this is on my desk. I don't know if you can read this. So for those of you on YouTube, will love it and see that.
That's awesome.
But my on my desk it says maybe swearing will help. And I've always most people say that made me comfortable when I saw that on your desk, because I didn't have to worry about if you're going to be offended. And I think that that's the other part too, right? Because
Yes.
we think our
Mhm.
secret. I tell people that the reason why you got to bring yourself into a room as a therapist, and for those who want to be blank slates, good for
That's
them.
okay.
Nothing against
Yeah.
them. Someone needs that too. But what I say is that when you bring in yourself into the room, it brings out the other person even more. But I don't know.
Yeah, it
I think that
does.
to me,
I
that just
agree.
gives them that permission to be themselves.
The permission, right? And to be vulnerable too, that, oh yeah, I wasn't going to tell you this, but this happened this morning for me too. And for them to connect with that and to understand and
I
to be
always think
more
it's
present.
important for us to be us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think as I've gotten older, that I become more and more myself and more in my own skin. And I think yoga has helped me too to embody myself more, just to be more present physically and spiritually too.
I think that my yoga practice, which has suffered recently, certainly has shown. But I also think that meditation and mindfulness is always something that kind of grounds me when I'm having a tough time. Even my therapist, what he does with me sometimes is that if everything's going hunky dory, he's like, let's do some body scans. I'm going to say some uncomfortable things. I'm going to do a body scan. I know what your experience is, what body scans are, but this morning I realized I actually am doing pretty good. Knock on wood. I'm going to knock on the mic. Um, because I think body scan is also part of the holistic stuff that, become more mindful and know what's going on with your body.
Absolutely, just knowing, because sometimes if we don't do that, we can disconnect and not really be paying attention to what's going. Because I know for me, if I've done the body scan, I'll be like, "Whoa, wait a second, wait, I do have a lot of tension there in my shoulders, and didn't notice that before." And it's that interoception, really tuning in. Because I have a lot of clients I have a lot of clients with trauma, so they come to me and they're a lot of times disconnected from their body and sensation. So getting them back in the body can help with emotional regulation and being more connected and centered.
Emotional regulation. That's very much a therapeutic standpoint, like traditional therapy.
Yeah.
Is that so? You talked about doing that in holistic counseling also. Is
Oh,
there any
yes.
particular big differences between holistic counseling versus, you know, I don't know what to call it, original or
I call it traditional
traditional, whatever
therapy.
we
Yeah.
I'm not very I don't like to play too much semantics either. Um,
Or what
but yeah,
people think
whatever you
of,
want to
right?
call it. Is there a huge difference between the two?
I think there's a difference. And a lot of people come to me because traditional therapy isn't enough for them. They've tried that route for years and it's just they've only gotten so far. I call it the CBT wall, the cognitive behavioral therapy wall. They can't outthink their trauma or outthink whatever issues going on, and they need something more. It's more, first of all, starting it from a holistic perspective, looking at the whole person. Is there other things that could be impacting their anxiety or depression? That's mostly what I treat. And trauma. Is there anything else that's going on? So I really have a holistic assessment that really digs deep. I take a little bit longer, I think, than other therapists to really get more background, to take my time with assessing everything. So I have a clearer picture of how all these are interacting. And I ask spirituality questions and if they're comfortable discussing that and go into that, as well as, physical issues. Is there any physical issues they have? What medications, which I know that could be standard, but looking at supplements too, because that can impact them if they're taking those. If are they going to any functional medicine doctors, any other holistic providers, those kind of things. So really getting clear when I first start with someone is how I start my sessions. And
I like
yeah.
the idea of a longer history taking. Um, when you talk about that, do you mean you have specific questions you ask to
Yes.
everyone?
Yeah.
Like what?
Just like, do you have any spiritual practices?
And
And
how
are
many
you
people
comfortable?
actually answer that?
Everybody. Yeah. Most people are pretty open. Even I have atheist clients and they're like, "Ah, yeah, sure. I'll talk about my beliefs and what that means." And also I ask about what are like some of the holistic practices they use, because that could be a starting point too, to see what are they already doing and are they using meditation, mindfulness, crystals, whatever it is that they're doing, and kind of talk about where they are with that and how that is a part of their coping skill, and that brings to treatment planning. So can we use some of these things that they already are familiar with to start? Because a lot of people know the right things to do, or not right, but the things that help, right? but they don't always do that. Right? We're human. Like
It's
you.
it's the irony of homeostasis, right?
Yeah.
We all aim for it, but when we get there, we're like, ugh.
Right. So getting them back into those practices, because part of what I do too is try to teach them how to be more consistent in these practices. How can you create a daily yoga practice or meditation based on what they are feeling is most helpful for them? And if they already have some things they're doing, well, let's try to build on that. Maybe they meditate just when they're anxious. How about we try to do that when you're not anxious? Because that's going to help open your window of tolerance so that you'll be less reactive to stress. It's going to help overall with the emotional regulation. And the holistic also brings in some different modalities. So there's a whole range that therapists can offer. So I offer breath work practices, meditation, mindfulness, grounding. It's a more somatic approach too that I use, really getting the body involved, not just the cognitive. Because if you think about traditional, it's more about cognitive strategies and it is partly with the relationship too that helps therapeutically.
Right.
But we go a little bit further to try to get the body involved in spiritual practices too. What do they like to use? Is there anything else they could use? And talk about their beliefs and dig a little more on that.
Well, you mentioned grounding, and the reason
Yes.
why I want to bring that up is because what I also want to do with finding your way through therapy is to get people to think about what does that mean? So I'm
Yes.
sure that people had grounding as you stay in the corner till the end of the session and think about what you just said and don't move from there.
Oh, I
Kind
see
of,
what you mean.
you've been grounded. You can't do anything. So grounding
True.
means like, I think that I've said to people, have you ever tried some grounding techniques with my kids? Yes. And I'm like, no, not that. Um, can you explain a little more about grounding techniques? Because I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
people don't get that. Like I said, I want to just demystify therapy as much as I possibly can here.
Absolutely. And again, I know I just mentioned some of these practices, but I always make sure clients are clear about what I mean by this. And of course, to practice these, to see what it's like in session. So we do these in session and I teach them how to use it outside the session. So grounding is, to me, it's connected with mindfulness. I don't know the differences sometimes, honestly, because they're very similar. Connecting
Agree.
to your body, like the body scan to me could be grounding. So noticing where you are from head to toe, noticing sensations, what is coming up for you, temperature. Does your body feel warm or cool? Where do you notice tension? And sometimes it is just noticing. We're not changing anything, just being present with what is, noticing your energy level, noticing what emotions might be coming up. How is your mind today? Is it racing or is it more still? Just seeing what's there, being present, which I guess is mindfulness too. So it's all interconnected, I think, with mindfulness. And
I think the reason why I ask, because I use a lot of grounding techniques, especially when people are having trauma issues.
yes, definitely.
It's one of my go-to when people are having a lot of trouble with their anxiety. They're aware of their body, but they're not aware how to address it. So we do a lot of grounding techniques.
Yes.
And for me, again, just to give you my work on grounding, that's why I wanted to hear yours. I also talk about, all right, look around your environment and look for 4 red things. Okay, look around your
Yes.
environment and look for 3 blue things. Look around your environment and see 5 yellow things. And
Yes.
most people are like, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm bringing you back to the moment. What's here?
Exactly.
And so I think with trauma, it helps
Orienting.
a lot. I
Yeah.
didn't know.
Yep. Orienting a response. So, and that can be just turning your head to the right, just looking around your room, going center, and then left, seeing what's there. So that actually triggers something in your brain that you're safe in your surroundings, that you're okay. So just seeing what's there in your room, looking at shapes. Tell me what shapes you see in your room, so kind of that mental grounding. So I use a lot of the physical grounding with yoga, which is breath and movement, or just noticing with a awareness. So it isn't just increasing that awareness of what's coming up in the body. And self-soothing I use a lot too. So that could be with self-touch for clients that are okay with that, which could mean just putting like a hand on the chest, hand on the belly, just being present. And just in that pose, that's a yoga pose, staying in that pose for just a little while too and noticing what comes up. Because what happens is that actually calms the nervous system. turns on that parasympathetic. So these simple things these are tools that clients can use. And I think that's a little different than talk therapy, because I know some therapists or some clients want more hands-on tools. And that's what I offer too, is just bringing some of these tools they can practice.
So what that brings to mind is that, and I've joked around with another guest of mine who's a friend of mine who does dance therapy. And I'm like, you just don't stop. Like, all right, we just talked about very difficult things about your past. How about we just break out into a yoga pose? Everybody get into downward dog. Um, but I'm joking around, of course,
Yes.
here. How do you integrate yoga into your therapy sessions?
Yeah. So lots of different ways. So initially, too, with clients, I let them know that I want them to have the agency to decide in their sessions what they want to do. And I'll be like, these are some skills I'm going to be teaching you. And just let me know if there's something at the beginning of a session that you want to address. And we could do some yoga or meditation. They know all these because I go through all these. And a lot of them will be like, oh my gosh, I have to do some yoga today. And they let me know. So again, giving them the agency. But some clients also like to do at the start of a session, how would you feel about doing some grounding to start today, or breath work? And especially if I notice when they come on that they're just like having trouble sitting still, they're really having difficulty just connecting right to their bodies. Sometimes we'll just do that organically too. Just, I notice that you're moving a lot in your seat, and it's harder on video. I will say that.
How
Sometimes
so?
it's you don't see the whole body, so I don't
Yeah.
always know what's happening from the beyond the shoulders and down. But if I notice in their face, or if they're really struggling, then let's see if we could start the session with something. But sometimes I do it in the middle. It just depends what's going on. So it's kind of the clinical judgment. So let's see. Because I've had some people too, we'll talk about an issue, we talk about ways to handle it, what's going on, how did they handle it? And then they're like, well, that's all I have for today. So I know we have a little bit more time. So is there anything else you want to focus on? They say, oh, well, would you want to work on a coping skill? And we could do XYZ. Or some people to end the session. So we have 5 minutes less, I've noticed. So I wanted to teach you a new breathing technique today. How would you feel about that? And this could be used for homework. And so again, we get informed consent. So none of this is forced on anybody. And this is, if they say no, then we don't do it. But most of the people that come see me are interested in these techniques, and they have learned that traditional therapy hasn't worked for them 100%. It helps, but it only brings them so far. So most of them are more motivated to try to integrate these into their lives.
And I think that you're absolutely right about traditional therapy. I think that, as you evolve in therapy, and again, it could be wrong, but sometimes I need my therapist to just sit there and be a therapist about different things. But, like my therapist constantly talks about, what are you doing for exercise? How is your spiritual life? Uh,
Yes.
are you paying attention to your body? All things like that. How do we communicate? Like for me, I think that there's some people, maybe they've had trauma, they start therapy at 45, and they may need traditional therapy for the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to put any time frames here. But for some people, they're in therapy for about a year and they go like, kind of hit a wall here. And
That's it.
that's when you kind of go, how do we tell people about this? Because it's not, there's some people who take it the wrong way. Like, well, maybe it's because we got to maybe work on more holistic approach.
Yeah.
And they say, well, no, you're just trying to milk me, or I don't need
Mm-hmm.
that crap, or what have you. And I know I'm asking you a little harder hitting question here,
That is.
but this is what this it's like hard copy. See, no one will get that reference except me and you.
Okay.
Um from the years ago. But anyway, how do we get to people to think about it that way?
Yeah, I think so. We have traditional therapy, but this is integrated with talk therapy. Right. So this is in addition. So I don't want people to think like we have traditional therapy and holistic, but no, we do these holistic modalities or perspectives integrated into the session. So I don't do yoga for the whole 53 minutes unless they're out of they don't take unless they're not insurance, and that's what they want. but the insurance we typically don't. It's integrating just parts of the session and parts of these practices. But again, if it's yoga every time, then they're just coming for yoga. That's not therapy, right? We need to integrate all this with the talk therapy as well. And not to put down talk therapy is very helpful and very effective. But it's just for some people, they want something more. And I have a lot more people, I say it, coming out of the holistic closet, because people are afraid sometimes to say that they have these practices. They use tarot cards, or they like to use incense and crystals, and I'm talking clients, they're even afraid to admit that, because some people judge that or say there's that's the devil's work. Or so sometimes I think just allowing space for people to be themselves, or if they practice Wicca, I get some people that have alternative spiritual beliefs, and that's cool, but they don't want to tell some therapists that.
Well, I call it woo-woo stuff.
Woo,
And
yeah. We jump in the woo on my podcast. Yes.
yeah,
Head
thank
first.
you. But yeah, no, I think that doing that stuff is so important, because I tell people we all have that side.
Yes.
Like, you think that sitting in your favorite chair is going to make your local team win the game. I'm pretty sure the New England Patriots are not going, oh, Steve's sitting in the couch at the right spot, let's play a little harder. But obviously we all have these little belief systems, and I tell people that you can call it whatever you want, but that's kind of a holistic approach. It's more like in the superstition realm. But who am I to, as I just made fun of myself here, but who am I to dismiss what people's beliefs are?
That's it. As therapists, we got to accept where they are.
Because I think that what I've, being someone who practices Buddhist principles, I've learned that I can learn from the Native Americans as much as I can learn from any traditional religion or the Wiccan, or there's a lot to be said about different religion and or belief system or spirituality. I think I draw my line onto cults.
Yeah, for sure. Anything that causes harm. Yes.
Right. I do know harm is the most universal spiritual belief system of them all.
Yes.
And I think that that's why I tell people, if you want to think that your tarot cards are going to help you, and if it's not harming you, who cares? Really, exactly. Who cares?
Mm-hmm. No, I agree.
And I know that we talked about it a little earlier, but the other one that I recommend to a whole lot of people is something that you actually are on too, and it's Insight Timer. Yes. I'm a big fan of Insight Timer, and I recommend that to people who, I just want to do it for 2 minutes. There's probably one for 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's why I love that too, because you can put in how much time you want, and there's a meditation for that.
I personally don't make any money from Insight Timer. I just want to make sure. But if you do go and find Chris's Insight Timer, I'm sure that there's a few of yours on there.
Yep. And there's breath work too. So I also teach breath work on there too. So
I think the other part too that I really like about Insight Timer is if you just want to do your own meditation, you can join other people starting at the same time as you, almost like, in a cosmic way. And so now it's no longer cosmic. It's on your app. They show it.
Exactly. Building community.
So I'm a big fan of Insight Timer. But again, moving on from Insight Timer, the other thing I wanted to ask you about is something called Aura. I don't know how I'm not as familiar as most people.
That's okay. Yeah.
But I'd like to hear more about the Aura app, because it's something that I feel is going to be something I'm going to be turning to very soon.
Yeah. So that's also an app that provides meditations, breath work. They have some talks on there. They're integrating some yoga as well. They also have coaching on there. I don't do coaching on there yet, but they're integrating more of these different modalities and being more open to some of these practices. And I also have some grounding meditations on there. Kind of my whole widespread thing. I do lots of different things with Aura app now. So providing these. And again, most of mine are short. I think that people don't want 25-minute meditation. I don't do 25 minutes. I don't always have time for that. So my 5 to 10 minute meditations, I think, are really helpful. And for sleep, that's the biggest of what they found with Aura. The research they found is they really need help with sleep, most of the listeners. So sleep is so important and so essential to our overall well-being. So using some of these meditations for sleep, yoga nidra is a great one, because that's using a body scan. But I can't tell you what happens at the end of yoga nidra, because I always fall asleep. But I do have one that I have on there. But yeah, there's so many different sleep stories, and I think that most people, that's a good way to do that too. And you don't have to add it to your schedule. You're already in bed, put on some earbuds or headphones and listen in and see if that helps.
And you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the Aura app to the show notes so that people can
Yes.
go and click and listen and see what they like, because I think it's important. And I definitely will be exploring it myself. So
Yes.
besides that, I'd like to hear more about your podcast too, because I you know, like I listen
So
to it,
many
obviously.
things. I
No,
know.
but this is the important part, because you know,
Yeah.
part of being in therapy, I tell people that sometimes I'll pick up more from therapy on podcasts that I might bring up to my therapist or what have you. So just something to keep in mind. And I think that listening to your podcast, it may be geared towards a certain crowd,
Yeah.
but I think
Hmm.
that everyone can really benefit. This is geared
Absolutely.
towards therapists. I think that mostly I want people to pay attention to what can bring them to therapy. But I also think therapists can gain something from this and all that. I listen to
Yeah.
your podcast, and I don't know what your population that you're going towards, but I can see a whole lot of people really benefit from it. So I'd like to hear more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing that I've started since April, I do some shorter sessions or session, call it sessions, podcast
We'll
episodes.
talk about it
Um,
after this session.
yes. So because what I found from listeners is that, they don't always have time for an hour long podcast. Most of mine are not. They're 30 to 45 minutes, but I started to do one solo episode per month. So I try, my goal was 20 minutes or under, and that can be hard for me sometimes, and then I do what are called holistic shorts, which is under 10 minutes. And that's super hard to get something quick, jump in. But I think it's helpful because I find that new listeners come and I listened to one of your shorts and it was very helpful because they're able just to bam, just get in there, get out. They learn something real quick. And I have a recent one about how do I find a holistic therapist? Because that was a question I get a lot too. So I'm interested in holistic therapy, but where do I find one? So that's something that I dive into with that. And I had an episode I think that everybody can relate to. How can I slow down more? I can't remember the title of my podcast, but that was about how do I slow down more? Because I know that people move so much and have difficulty relaxing. So that this is in general too for anybody. And I also have some topics on breath work, meditation, adding meditation to your day. So many holistic things, talking with angels, spirituality practices, tarot cards. So yeah, you name it. We're hitting everything.
And I think that tarot cards are something that people under appreciate a whole lot, but that's just me.
Yes, yes,
So
exactly. And
again,
they can be used in therapy too.
and so how do people reach you to get any type of information, whether it is the
Yeah.
apps or listen to your podcast? Is there a particular way to find you?
Yeah. So my podcast is holisticcounselingpodcast.com. I just want to point out an episode for your listeners they might be interested in. This episode, I found people have gone back to. There's a way that we as podcasters can see how many people are listening and staying with the episode. This one was one of the most popular. And I'm just shocked at how many people have gone back to this episode and listened again. So, as episode 105, it's breath work as a technique for stress reduction. And it was with my guest, Dominique Clifton. So, great episode for you to check out to learn more about breath work and how you can use it. And I have, oh, he looked it up. Yes, that's it.
Go
And
on YouTube if you want to see it, but we'll also
woohoo,
show link it.
I have a free 30-day guest pass for your listeners as well.
Oh,
They can find more peace with meditation and get the sleep they need. So I have the link that you can put in the show notes for that.
oh, please go, and that's perfect. I think people will really
Yes, to get a
appreciate
little
that.
taste of it and
Oh, I think that
check it out.
I think we all need a little spiritual practice in all our lives. You know, I'll share this, and because I think it's part of what I used to. I grew up Catholic, and then I was a recovering Catholic, and then I was an atheist, and I realized something was missing in my life. Luckily, I learned that in my early to mid 30s. And so I'm not saying that I'm Mr. Guru on any of this stuff, but I certainly have increased my spiritual practice everywhere. And I will say that absolutely go to the show note, go click on it, because I think we all need a little spiritual practice. You want to call it holistic, you want to call it religion, you want to call it whatever the hell you want. I really don't care personally. I just think we all need it. But I just want to plug that in there.
Yes, absolutely. And if you haven't done any of these practices, sometimes it's good just to experiment, see what works for you.
Worst case scenario, you don't learn anything and you didn't lose anything.
Yep.
Best case
Exactly.
scenario, you gain an app that you're going to use on a regular basis. I think that's just an amazing thing.
For sure.
Well, Chris, I can't thank you enough for your time. I know we're all busy, but I'll see you at other staff meetings, I'm sure.
Yes.
Or what do we call them? Hour, or like office hours, I
Office
think.
hours.
Yeah, I'm
Yes.
sorry. I'm sorry, Gordon. Don't fire me. Um, but really great to talk to you. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes. Thanks for having me. This has been great.